You're listening to the Giant Shoulders Podcast, a show all about gratitude and legacy. I'm your host, Ryan Augustine. Let's get into today's episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Giant Shoulders Podcast. I am so excited for this episode today. This is going to be another good one. We have Aaron Abodeely on the show today. Welcome, Aaron.
What's up, guys? And I've never met Ryan before, certainly not in person, but now we get a chance to put some video behind the LinkedIn profile. So nice to meet you, dude, as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks so much for being on. And I have to give a special shout out to Seth Thompson for introducing us. He's a great guy, really great connector of people. And he spoke very highly of you. And I was like, well, let's just reach out and see if Aaron would like to be on this crazy podcast. And here we are. So this is great.
Here we are. Yeah. And, you know, I know what it's like to start a podcast. Like, I'll never claim to be a pro, but it matters so much when people accept that invite and they even have something mildly cool to say. Mm-hmm. It's super helpful. And I love the mission of what you're doing. You got to interview Will Boyd. Yep. And you've interviewed Seth. And so I'm glad we get to keep the chain going, man.
Yeah, this is so cool, man. It's been really cool to, so many people have just really great stories to tell, and allowing a small platform for that, I think has been special. And yeah, I think we've all got something to learn from everybody else. So really excited to have you on today to see what's in store for the listeners. But before we jump in, I guess, to the kind of the main questions, who is Aaron? Like, give us a 10,000 foot overview of who you are, your background, life, business. Would love to have kind of that framework.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's like the 1 minute elevator pitch, and then there's what I think resonates with people about my sort of 10,000 foot view. But elevator pitch, I was born and raised in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and went to University of Iowa. And people don't know this, but now that I've traveled and lived in other parts of the country, they think, oh, Cedar Rapids, you must have had a graduating class of like 20 people, right? You grew up in a cornfield. And Cedar Rapids is the second biggest city in the state, behind Des Moines, which is the capital. And so my graduating class was almost 400 people, and then went to University of Iowa because like a bunch of kids from my class did. So I was like, okay, cool. And I actually started as an international studies major, and I thought I was like gonna leave college and join the Peace Corps. And then I quickly realized like, oh, like you're in college because you have to make money. And so promptly switched my major to business almost out of fear, honestly, when I realized like, oh, I've got these student loans hurtling at me at someday. Sure. And I'm glad I had that foresight. But so majored in business, international studies, and Spanish. And then right out of college, dude, I took a job at GoDaddy, actually. A lot of folks in Iowa and Cedar Rapids work there. It's a call center gig doing customer support and sales for like websites and email products. And I fell in love with the IT world and marketing and team leadership. And so since then, I've worked at IT solution providers, doing various things from like marketing, events, managing sort of cold call or BDR type teams, appointment setter teams. And then 2.5 years ago, I quit my full-time job in Indianapolis. And now I have a sort of small business, I'm self-employed, and I consult sales teams, both doing tactical training and then helping new reps come up the curve in the IT industry. So that's like the elevator pitch, Aaron. But probably what resonates most with people is, I'm actually pretty public with this on LinkedIn, but I hit a really dark point in my life about 3 years ago when I found myself with over $20,000 of credit card debt, still had student loans I was paying off, had a very expensive lease on a like very nice apartment downtown Indianapolis. I mean, I was just like drinking so much, and alcoholism runs in my family. I mean, grew up around drugs, not on my mom's side, but my parents are divorced. And so I saw a lot of that. My brother unfortunately went down the path of drugs. And so I just realized like, man, I'm like, even though I have this good job, I have this self-fulfilling prophecy of like, I'm in debt. Like I'm drinking, boozing too much. Like my life is going nowhere fast. And so I basically quit drinking 3 years ago, January 4th. So guys, we're recording this on December 21st, 2020. So in a couple weeks, will be my 3-year anniversary. So yeah, man, I think, and had I not quit drinking, I wouldn't have run a full marathon. And had I not run that full marathon, I wouldn't have had the discipline to pay off that debt. And had I not paid off that debt, I wouldn't have started my business, which today, you know, every year I'm growing exponentially. And I've displaced the salary I was making when I had a full-time job, just doing it my way. It's a ton of fun. Yeah, so that's what people probably resonate with the most.
That's awesome, man. How do you make that jump from working at a company to all of a sudden deciding, hey, I'm gonna start my own business? Like what's the first thing you do when you make that decision?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question because I do think, so I'm 34, and when I quit my job, I think I was 31. So I had like 10 years of experience under my belt. So if you're like 25 or 27 and you want to go be a consultant for like other businesses, the reality is people probably won't take you super seriously until you have some actual job experience and wins under your belt. And so I do think timing's a component of it, and just wisdom that you have to get from experience. But I would say 2 other components is discipline and accountability. Because when you quit your job, nobody's your boss except for you. Nobody can tell you what your product offering is going to be except for you, you know, and you have to go fail. You have to go put yourself out in the marketplace and hope that it resonates. You know, this is why I really respect what you're doing. I started a podcast. Will Boyd had inspired me to start a podcast, but like, you just got to feel stuff out, because what you originally think your business idea will be, promise you it'll change as you begin to execute and get out into the marketplace. And so yeah, discipline and accountability. Like you have to be accountable to yourself, and you have to be disciplined to stick with it. Because I think had I quit 12 months in or any sooner than that, it wouldn't have worked. It probably took 18 months before I really started getting the momentum I needed.
Gotcha. Okay, so to get traction, it took a little bit of staying power for you to stick in there, take some gut shots, and take some hits in order for you to start landing your own punches.
Yeah. And I would say too, dude, like I don't have a family. So, I mean, tons of respect for anybody who starts a business with like kids, little ones, and you leave that safety net of having a full-time job.
Sure.
But also, like I mentioned, I think had I not quit drinking, you know, I may be waking up hungover and then not wanting to do work on my business. Like I don't have a boss. Mm-hmm. So I could just, you know, or I could be hanging out with friends. I could be traveling a ton. And like, I went through that path of having the discipline with paying off debt and quit drinking, because I knew I wanted to do something special in the back. And so I think I set myself up for success, because like a giant part of it's mental, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's so true. And a lot of people, obviously there's a huge component of genetics that have an impact on alcoholism. And that's the struggle to quit something like that is a lot more difficult than just sticking to something because you're feeling disciplined. Like there's chemical reactions and things going on there that make it even more difficult. So being able to do that and then starting a business is probably like, well, this is probably easy compared to that piece there. So
it's so true. I mean, you know, you're making content on LinkedIn, but I've noticed any sort of viral post or any sort of virality I've ever seen is around the challenges of starting a business and quitting drinking. And I think those two things like resonate with people because, you know, you go to work every day with teammates, or you have clients who like are struggling emotionally, are struggling with personal finances. I mean, that's the world you work in. Is folks, you know, trying to build personal wealth, but some people are in such a deep hole that they'll never call your phone, Ryan, to work with you, because, you know, they're constantly digging out, whether that's student loans or consumer debt, like credit card debt, you know, paying way too much on a house or apartment, living some lifestyle that like they can't actually afford. And so that's one thing I'm passionate about, like helping sales reps with that I do today is like, there's a large personal component to you being a successful professional. Yeah. And that's why I do think it's important to talk about this.
Oh, I love that.
In business. Like, you know, think about if you're a CEO of a company, yeah, and there's a sales team of 100 people, think about the economic impact of people who don't know how to get their personal finances in order and don't know how to get their drinking in check. Like assume of that team of 100 people, 30 people on that team have either problems with personal finance or, you know, drinking or doing too many substances. Like, yeah, major economic impact on your sales team. So any culture where it's like taboo to talk about, fundamentally disagree with.
That's super interesting. Yeah. And I don't think, you know, I've never been in a position where you're managing teams of that sort, but that's got to be something. I mean, having a personal element there, it's not only good for the humans that you're working with, right? The people that you're working with, trying to grow them and I guess kind of cultivate them to be the best people they can be, apart from productive employees. Man, that's so cool. That's so cool, because that's really like when we're 18 and we're getting into the business world, we're not like, I want to be the most successful IT recruiter on the face of the planet. I want to be the most successful B2B software sales rep on the face of the planet. Like, we don't have those specific goals. We all know that we want to be really great people. And so we're not really sure what that looks like. And so I think having somebody to come alongside you and say, hey, this is how you succeed in business, but also here's how you succeed personally. And you're going to face these challenges that I faced. You're speaking that like to power. And I think that's so cool, Aaron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, there's other ways to think about it too. Like, some people very much enjoy, let's say, the happy hour culture and doing that in business as a way to build relationships with your team members and clients and stuff. And like, if you've got that under control, go nuts. Like, I think a lot of people do in fact have it under control, or, you know, a lot of people like are money motivated. Like, great. I work with sales reps, and some of the best ones, it's because they're money motivated, mm-hmm, and they want to buy cool stuff with their paychecks. And so like, if you're feeling gratified and like actualized and like whatever thing you're doing, go nuts. But I think the problem is when people feel like they're supposed to do that stuff, but in their heart, it's like, but this is off. And just because everyone else at my company does it, like, I guess I'm going to do it too, even though I don't feel right. And I think that's the concern. So if you feel like you're an outlier, like, you maybe are, and you should explore that. And like, it's okay to do things differently.
Yeah. I love that. Well, because you go from probably trying to manufacture that motivation and manufacture that drive to then when you hit that niche, it's like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what gets me going. This is what actualizes me. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Awesome. Well, I love your story. You know, the premise of this podcast, I think, is really two things. It's number one is gratitude. And that's for kind of being thankful for the people who have brought you to where you are. I mean, obviously you've done a lot of work on yourself personally, but I have to imagine there are some people in your life who've had a role and played a role. And so first, I'd absolutely love to hear about those people, and then we'll get to kind of your legacy. But like, who are some of those? I guess I'll call it the Mount Rushmore of people in Aaron's life.
Yeah, dude. So I was thinking about this a little bit before we recorded, and I think there's family, friends, and then professional relationships. And so family, you know, my mom was divorced to my dad, and she worked as a bartender, and we lived in a freaking trailer, and she put herself through paralegal school at community college. You know, yeah, man, she worked so hard. You know, she had me and my brother when she was like 21 years old. And then, you know, later my stepdad came into the picture, and he was a bit of a pit bull, a bit of a bear. You know, he worked in a factory, and like, it wasn't super easy. And I was like, why is my stepdad such an a-hole? But, fast forward to today, I'm best friends with my mom and stepdad. And I just have so much respect for like the way they had to raise us, because we just didn't have anything. And like, my stepdad was angry and maybe a little strict because he was like working overnights at a paper factory. So they've been huge inspirations to me. Now it was tough for them to be cheerleaders of me in high school and college, because they were young themselves.
Yeah.
They were worried about their own lives. But now they've gotten past that. And they're more cheerleaders of me today than like in high school and in college, because I think they just have the emotional availability for it, which is very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's family. Friends, you had him on the podcast. My best friend is Will Boyd. Will, for whatever reason, he was very kind to me in high school, and he always took interest in the way I live life, and I think he liked that I was a good person. But when we went to college, I was going to go to a community college, and he was going to go to University of Iowa. And he's like, Aaron, my parents won't let you go to community college. Like, they want to help you pay to go to University of Iowa. And if you want to come, you can't say no. Like, they're not going to let you say no. And like, so Will is like a brother to me. Like, I'm that close to him, and because, and so if you think about gratitude, like, people took a chance on me, and I feel like I was always trying to be a good person, but in little small ways, I think back to that, and it's like, how can I pay it forward with time and energy? And that's the type of person Will is. You guys can go listen to Ryan's episode with Will to get a sense of that, but he's a good dude, and he worries about other people first before himself. Yeah. So that's maybe a friend one. And then professionally, she doesn't know I'm going to talk about her, and she'll probably think this is stupid, but a friend named Karen Coon, when I moved to Indianapolis, I worked with her at our past IT solution provider, service provider. And Ryan, get this, a week into our time together, all our coworkers were like, Karen, how did you and Aaron know each other before he started working here? And we were both like, I didn't know her. It was just like right away, we had this like brother sister connection. So Karen's like 10 years older than me. And I didn't have a trainer. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. And Karen was just like this tough as nails salesperson. And like, I could tell she'd be frustrated when she would have to explain stuff to me, but I would just listen, and I'd be like, Karen, what do I do? And she'd explain it. I'd go do it. And like, if it weren't for her, I don't think I would be in like the IT infrastructure, IT channel sort of world. So I owe a ton to Karen. We're still friends to this day.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I love that. It's crazy how, like, so you and Will were the same class in high school, grew up together?
Yeah. So he moved to Iowa. He was a military brat. His dad is in the Army.
That's right.
And so he moved to Iowa, I think it was our freshman year of high school. Okay. So we got close, like sophomore year of high school. And then from high school, went to college at University of Iowa together.
I just think it's so crazy. Like, thinking about him, thinking about Karen, like, the chance of you guys connecting up is like slim to none, right? Like, what are the odds of connecting up? And just the impact, the blessing it is to have people like that in your life, who first of all, like, take interest in you, right? Like Will and his parents, like, they saw something in you that maybe you didn't even see in yourself. And then Karen kind of like having that, like, that supportive kind of like mentoring role right out of school, first job. Like, man, like, that can really change a person's trajectory, having a couple of those people in their life.
Yeah. Karen was very much my sort of like tough love. Just because I'm direct doesn't mean I don't care. It's just like, I'm busy and I'm trying to get crap done. And it was so valuable to watch that type of person operate, because I was like the master of fluff, I think, before I met Karen. It's like, oh man, like, wow, these people are angry all the time that's a very short, like 4-word email response to my book, my 2 paragraphs I sent. And
yeah,
you start to realize like people are busy, and like direct communication in business is okay. Like it doesn't mean they don't like you.
right.
And so, having like learning that side of the emotional intelligence in the business world, Karen gave me a front row seat to that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Very cool. So, kind of the second piece that I think is super important, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say on this, is kind of that legacy that you want to leave. So that's part number 2 of kind of the premise of this podcast. And however it helps you to think about it, if it's like 20 years down the road looking back, what do you want people to say about you? Or if somebody else came on this podcast and was talking about Aaron, like what would you want them to say? Like what are some of those things that you want to leave as a legacy for business and life, friends, family, those sorts of things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's some element of like a near-term legacy. So I suppose what near-term legacy is like reputation, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Because like on a 5-year timeline or 3-year, 6-month timeline, like you still think ahead of like, oh, how do I want people to think about me in 6 months or 5 years, right? So I would say in the short term, I've thought a lot about this, at least with respect to business. And I do love helping people. Like I sort of fell into my first inside sales manager role. And it was because I was doing marketing and events at a company. And the leadership kept being like, we need someone to manage these like appointment setters, these BDRs. Aaron, you would be great at it. You worked in a call center back at GoDaddy. Like you understand how, just what inside sales is. And I was like, no, I want to stick with marketing. And then I came to realize like marketing in a lot of ways is boring. And this is why I love podcasting, for example, because like it's the coolest part of marketing, I think, which is like engaging with people.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I love just helping new salespeople to the IT industry. So I suppose my short-term legacy is like speaking the language of a new person when it's an industry full of 20, 30-year execs who maybe don't have the time and energy to like explain these basic concepts.
Yeah.
I really enjoy doing that. So I've actively created a client, my current active clients. That's what I get to do every day. So yeah, man, that's my short-term legacy.
Nice.
And I suppose long-term, we can maybe link to it in the show notes, but Will has a podcast called Man in Progress Podcast. I'm not sure if he mentioned it, but, and before that we did a few episodes of the Breaking Student Debt podcast together. Also his podcast. He's a serial podcaster, but across a few interviews we've done together, I would like to find a way to, not get like a chemical addiction counselor type of certification. Like I don't want to do that, but in the future, I do want to, I hope I'll have enough money to spend time on the side, just helping people who are in the business world, but like are really struggling with the expectations of the business world. And like their life is spinning out of control. And they're like, you may not think those people exist, but I know they exist because I was one of them. And, I'm not sure if Will brought up his idea of suicide in your episode with him, but he had debated it. I never got to that point, but I certainly, it was pretty dark. And once I kind of went public with my story, a lot of people were like, oh dude, Aaron, I've been feeling the same way. Like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Dude, people you wouldn't even expect.
Yeah.
Sitting right next to you, you're connected with, you email back and forth every day. Like they exist. They're right here, right now. And I think that'd be at least something within my swim lane that I could very much help people.
I think, excuse me. I think that's so cool, man. Because I bet when you started sharing your story with people, that their gut reaction was not, I knew that about Aaron. I knew no, they were surprised. I bet you, they were like, oh my gosh. And then people start coming out of the woodwork. And it's like, well, if I'm not the only one now, when I made this public, I'm certainly not the only one again 3 years later. I'm not going to be the only one 5 years from now. And I think there's always, and it's such a cool thing that you can do, because you're not only impacting how successful they are in business, but as like for men, like leaders at home, parents, husbands.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ripple effect there is incredible. I get jacked up just thinking about it. That could be so cool.
Yeah, dude. And then, there's a handful of people with non-traditional backgrounds who, who are not white males who come from a privileged background. Like I happen to be a white male, and my background was certainly much easier than a lot of folks. But like, I think about those people too. And like, I don't know what it's like to have that lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
But just having empathy for what it's like to try to navigate the business world, like when you're not like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I look like everybody else, I don't feel like it on the inside. And there are definitely people who don't look like it on the outside. And it's like, it's not easy for them. Always. And yeah, I think it's important just to think about, like, not everyone has the same path as you.
Right.
Will,
that's okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
And Will talked about this in your episode with him. I thought this was pretty cool, but he mentioned the digital mentors or people who, like the whole personal development, self-help world. I think a prevalent topic that they talk about is like embracing your vulnerability. And I know it might sound a little bit cheesy, but like the way you become approachable and the way you're seen as someone who can provide help is like spill your guts yourself a little bit. There's a time and place for it. Not always perfect timing, but if you can find that time and place, whether it's one-on-one or in a small group or whenever you need to go public with something, like do it, because some people may be turned off, but you might help a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, right. And I think, I mean, to that point, like there are a lot of people who may have gone through something that you've gone through. You're not the only one who's gone through it. And so if they hear your story, like they don't think you're messy. They're like, I was there. I want to help you. And I think that's so cool. I was just doing an interview a little while ago and was talking to a guy, and I think it's really important to have somebody that you're mentoring in life and somebody mentoring you almost at all times. I mean, there are a couple of situations where I could see it not working out, but I think that that's such an important thing that we need from you're kind of pulling somebody up to where you are and then getting pulled by somebody else in the other direction. And I think that's just such a cool, we can always serve somebody, we can always be served by somebody. And there's this cool like humility that exists when you do that.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe I'll ask you, I'm super curious your thoughts on this. Have you ever struggled with either not having a mentor, or maybe you struggled with alcoholism or personal finances? I mean, what's your experience been with any of those topics? Like something inspired you to start this podcast. I guess I didn't ask you.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think, it's a couple different things. I love connecting with people. I think everybody's got a story that can speak to somebody. And they also have a story that can thank somebody for like where they've been, and not everybody takes the time to say thank you. And so I think just trying to make those things a little bit more public, like, hey, I had this great teacher back in the day, or I had this great mentor back in the day. And I think, I've been in spots multiple times throughout my life where it's like, and I really could use some direction here.
Yeah.
And like, this would be really helpful for navigating how to be a young married man who's going through not feeling like I'm providing for my family all in all. I also feel like there have been some really rewarding mentor relationships where I've been meeting with somebody and it's like, this is really cool. And then they go on and they do other things. But I think there's power in kind of that accountability. And I really think that we're better as a society when we're together, as opposed to just kind of going through life on our own, kind of like, grinding it out, whatever that means. You need to be supporting each other. And so I think that this was just a way for me to try to bring people together, and connect with people outside the guise of, hey, let's do some personal finances and go through what our group can do to help you, because that's important. But that's kind of, similar to you, like that's one aspect of fulfillment and success. I think the other piece that you touch on really, really well is that personal side of things. And so I think that's kind of like, this is kind of like my way of doing that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's powerful, dude. Like we have to find reasons to share stories, like almost an excuse. That's why I love podcasting, because the interview almost creates a structured reason to talk about yourself or extract it out of somebody else. Like take me and Will, for example, we're best friends. Like we've been roommates. Even last year we were roommates. We're like 33-year-old dudes, just, still living together. But even when we turn on the podcast mics, like you learn stuff even about your best friends that you didn't know. And so it's almost like, modern sitting around the campfire, telling stories. It's been a tradition for a long time, but it's easy when we're stuck in our 24/7 inboxes of our email, because business pressure is different in the digital age, to social media, to, whatever's going on in your brain with depression or anxiety or your desire for material things, if that's what you're into. Like, I don't know, but sometimes it's nice to pause and just talk to somebody. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, man. This is good.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Aaron. And likewise, it's been a pleasure for me to have you on the show. Asking people to be on the podcast, it's kind of like, well, this is kind of a crazy idea. It's a crazy thing. And for people to say yes, it's, give up an hour of your time to come on is, it's humbling for me. And so I love that this has served you. But yeah, so I think, I'm just grateful for you coming on, grateful for your story. I mean, it was cool getting introduced through Seth, and then I was interviewing with Will, and he's like, hey man, you got to talk to Aaron. I was like, oh, we got to line up. We're doing it. And so he gave me a little bit of a primer and a teaser, which was cool. But I think, you guys all have great stories. And so it's been an honor to have a small part in that and hear about it a little bit. And so thank you.
You're welcome, man.
What's the best place to connect with you for people who want to learn a little bit more about you, your podcast, your business, and what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's a little out of date, because you go from trying to get people to buy your, services to all of a sudden they buy your services and you don't need to brand yourself anymore. But if you go to outcomestudio.com, that's my company website, and you'll see all the podcast episodes there. And it's kind of partitioned off in the blog. So I've got something like 35 episodes, and each episode goes through two things. Almost like you, I asked the person, what prompted you just all the way back when you graduated college to get into sales or marketing? Or if you didn't think you were going to get into sales marketing, like, what did you think you would be out of college?
Yeah.
And then, that kind of, there's some backstory component to it. And then we dive into some more tactical sales and marketing stuff. But yeah, and then connect with me on LinkedIn, Aaron Abodeely, the best place.
Awesome, man. Cool.
Well,
thank you again for your time today. This was awesome. I love hearing your heart and your story. So thank you for sharing, and we'll be in touch. Connect with Aaron if you want to know more. I know lots of people will. So thanks for being on.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan.